What if I told you that Australia is reaping all the benefits of NATO membership without actually being in NATO? While China builds artificial islands and flexes its naval muscles across the Indo-Pacific, Australia has quietly positioned itself as the most strategically valuable non-NATO ally on the planet. And Beijing is absolutely furious. Welcome to the Doctrine of War. Today we're diving deep into how the land down under has turned its geographic isolation into a strategic goldmine, leveraging NATO's infrastructure, intelligence, and military might to become an unsinkable aircraft carrier in the Pacific. This isn't just about alliances on paper. This is about Australia transforming itself into China's worst nightmare without firing a single shot. The NATO backdoor, how Australia plays the alliance game. Let's get one thing straight. Australia isn't in NATO. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, by definition, is a North Atlantic alliance. Australia sits in the Indo-Pacific, roughly 15,000 kilometers from NATO headquarters in Brussels. But here's where it gets interesting. Australia doesn't need to be in NATO to benefit from everything NATO offers. Through a web of bilateral and multilateral agreements, Australia has created what military strategists call NATO-equivalent access, without the formal obligations. Think of it as having a premium gym membership without paying the full dues. The cornerstone of this arrangement is the ANZUS Treaty with the United States, signed in 1951, which essentially gives Australia a direct pipeline to the world's most powerful military. But that's just the beginning. Australia is one of only 3 countries outside NATO to hold Enhanced Opportunities Partner status with the alliance. The other 2? Sweden and Finland, both of which have since joined NATO proper, which tells you everything about the value of this designation. Through this status, Australia participates in NATO operations, joint exercises, intelligence sharing, and strategic planning sessions. Australian officers have served in NATO headquarters. Australian troops have fought alongside NATO forces in Afghanistan, Iraq, and multiple peacekeeping missions. But the real magic happens in the intelligence realm. Australia is a member of the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance alongside the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, and New Zealand. This is arguably more valuable than NATO membership itself. Five Eyes gives Australia access to signals intelligence, satellite imagery, cyber intelligence, and strategic assessments that most NATO countries never see. When American satellites track Chinese naval movements, Australian intelligence officers see the same data in real time. When British signals intelligence intercepts communications from Beijing, Canberra gets the brief. Integrated air and missile defense systems that NATO has spent decades perfecting? Australia is plugging into those same networks through bilateral agreements with the United States. The advanced training programs that keep NATO forces at peak readiness? Australian Defence Force personnel rotate through them constantly. The cutting-edge military technology that NATO countries develop collaboratively? Australia gets early access, often before some NATO members. And here's the kicker. Australia contributes significantly to this ecosystem without shouldering the political baggage that comes with NATO membership. NATO countries are bound by Article 5, the collective defense clause that states an attack on one is an attack on all. This commitment has dragged NATO members into conflicts they'd rather avoid and created political headaches from Turkey to Hungary. Australia faces no such obligation. It can pick and choose its engagements based purely on national interest. If you're finding value in this deep dive into military strategy and geopolitics, hit that like button and subscribe to Doctrine of War. We cut through the noise to bring you the real story behind global military dynamics. Your support helps us keep producing this content. Consider the practical benefits Australia extracts from this arrangement. When Australian forces deploy overseas, they operate seamlessly with NATO forces because they train to NATO standards and use NATO-compatible equipment. The interoperability that NATO has spent 75 years perfecting, Australia has it. When Australian pilots need advanced training, they attend Top Gun equivalent programs in the United States. When Australian naval officers need to understand modern carrier operations, they embed with the US 7th Fleet. When Australian Special Forces need to sharpen their edge, they train with British SAS and American Delta Force. This access extends to procurement and industrial cooperation. Australia has been integrated into the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program from its inception, building components and receiving aircraft. The Collins-class submarines, while built in Australia, incorporated technology and expertise from multiple NATO countries. The upcoming AUKUS submarine deal, where Australia will receive nuclear-powered attack submarines, is the most advanced technology transfer in naval history, something typically reserved only for the closest allies. NATO's strategic deterrence also works in Australia's favor. The alliance's collective military spending exceeds $1 trillion annually. That's a security umbrella casting a very long shadow across the globe. While NATO focuses on European security and the North Atlantic, its capabilities are globally deployable. In any serious Indo-Pacific conflict involving Australia, NATO countries, particularly the United States and United Kingdom, would almost certainly intervene. China knows this. Beijing's strategic planners understand that attacking Australia would trigger a response not just from Canberra, but from Washington, London, and potentially other NATO capitals. This gets to the heart of modern deterrence. Australia doesn't need to match China's military spending dollar for dollar or ship for ship. It must make the cost of aggression unacceptably high. By positioning itself as an integral part of the Western alliance system, with deep NATO connections, Australia multiplies its defensive capability exponentially. Now let's talk about why this matters in the China context. Beijing's rise as a military and economic superpower represents the most significant shift in global power dynamics since the end of the Cold War. The Chinese Communist Party has made no secret of its ambitions: reunify with Taiwan by force if necessary, dominate the South China Sea, establish Chinese primacy in the Indo-Pacific, and displace American influence from the region. Australia sits in the middle of these ambitions like a cork in a bottle. Geographic location matters in geopolitics, and Australia's position is pure strategic gold. It commands approaches to the Indian Ocean, sits astride key maritime choke points, and provides an unsinkable platform for projecting power throughout Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands. For China to achieve true regional dominance, it needs to either co-opt Australia or neutralize it. Beijing has tried the former through economic coercion. Australia sends roughly 1/3 of its exports to China, but repeatedly discovered that Australians won't compromise on national security for economic gain. When Australia banned Huawei from its 5G networks in 2018, China retaliated with trade restrictions. When Australia called for an independent investigation into COVID-19's origins, Beijing imposed punitive tariffs on Australian barley, wine, beef, and coal. These measures hurt Australian exporters but achieved nothing strategically. Australia didn't blink. Instead, it doubled security cooperation with the United States and other partners, leading directly to the 2021 AUKUS agreement. China's coercion backfired spectacularly, pushing Australia deeper into the Western alliance system and demonstrating to other countries that standing up to Beijing is possible. From a military perspective, Australia presents China with a nightmare scenario. In any serious Indo-Pacific conflict, particularly over Taiwan, Australia's northern bases would become launching points for American bombers, fighters, and reconnaissance aircraft. The Bear Bases program currently underway in northern Australia is upgrading 4 airfields to handle increased American military activity. These aren't just runways, they're strategic infrastructure that extends American airpower reach by thousands of kilometers. Pine Gap, the joint US-Australian intelligence facility in Central Australia, is one of the most important strategic installations on Earth. This facility provides early warning of ballistic missile launches, tracks satellites, intercepts communications, and supports American nuclear command and control. In a Taiwan scenario, Pine Gap would be absolutely critical for coordinating American and Allied responses. Beijing knows it can't conduct major military operations in the Indo-Pacific while Pine Gap is operational, which is why Chinese military literature frequently discusses the facility as a potential first strike target. But here's where Australia's NATO connections become a force multiplier for deterrence. If China were to strike Pine Gap or other Australian territory, it wouldn't just be attacking Australia, it would be attacking American personnel and American strategic capabilities on Australian soil. That's an automatic trigger for US retaliation under ANZUS. Moreover, such an attack would likely activate Australia's deep ties with NATO countries, particularly the United Kingdom, which has explicitly stated its commitment to Indo-Pacific security. Australia is also building its own military capabilities in ways specifically designed to complicate Chinese strategic planning. The acquisition of nuclear-powered submarines under AUKUS will give Australia the ability to conduct extended patrols in contested waters and hold Chinese naval forces at risk far from Australian shores. These aren't defensive weapons. These are offensive platforms designed to sink ships and threaten Chinese maritime supply lines. The expansion of Australia's northern bases, the positioning of American Marines in Darwin, the increasing tempo of joint exercises like Talisman Sabre. All of this sends a clear message to Beijing. Australia is not a soft target. Any attempt to coerce or attack Australia would be met with a coordinated response from the most powerful military alliance system in human history. Chinese strategists are also deeply concerned about Australia's role in the emerging lattice of Indo-Pacific partnerships. Beyond ANZUS and the NATO connection, Australia is a key member of the Quad alongside the United States, Japan, and India. It has defense agreements with Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and other regional partners. It's strengthening military ties with Vietnam, the Philippines, and Pacific Island nations. Each of these relationships adds another layer of complexity to Beijing's strategic calculations. Consider the geography again. If China attempts to project power southward into the Indian Ocean, it has to pass through waters where Australia and its partners operate. If China wants to secure its energy imports from the Middle East, which transit through the Indian Ocean, those sea lanes run right through Australia's maritime approaches. If China wants to establish a true blue water navy capable of global operations, it needs access to ports and bases in the Indian Ocean region, where Australia has significant influence. This is why Beijing has invested heavily in the Belt and Road Initiative across the Pacific Islands and in port facilities from Pakistan to Sri Lanka to Tanzania. China is trying to break out of what strategists call the first island chain, the line of islands from Japan through Taiwan to the Philippines that constrains Chinese naval expansion. Australia sits at the southern terminus of this chain, making it geographically impossible for China to achieve true maritime freedom without somehow dealing with the Australian factor. The economic dimension also matters for deterrence. Yes, China is Australia's largest trading partner, but that relationship is increasingly a liability for Beijing, not an asset. Australian iron ore, coal, and natural gas are critical inputs for Chinese industrial production. When Beijing tried to restrict Australian coal imports in 2020, Chinese power plants faced shortages and blackouts. Beijing learned that economic interdependence cuts both ways. China needs Australian resources as much as Australia needs Chinese markets. Meanwhile, Australia is systematically diversifying its economic relationships to reduce vulnerability to Chinese coercion. Trade with India, Japan, South Korea, and ASEAN nations is growing. The economic pain of Chinese trade restrictions is real but manageable, while the strategic benefits of standing firm are long-lasting. Here's the uncomfortable truth that keeps Chinese military planners awake at night. Australia has successfully positioned itself as an integral component of American power projection in the Indo-Pacific while maintaining enough independent capability to be dangerous in its own right. It's not an American puppet. Australians are fiercely independent and make their own strategic decisions, but it's aligned closely enough with American interests that attacking Australia means fighting the United States. This is deterrence in its purest form. China can't achieve its strategic objectives in the Indo-Pacific without neutralizing Australia, but neutralizing Australia requires taking on the United States and potentially other NATO countries. That's a fight Beijing isn't confident it can win, which means Australia's geographic position and alliance relationships have effectively stalemated Chinese ambitions in the southern Indo-Pacific. The submarine deal under AUKUS particularly enrages Beijing because it represents a permanent shift in the regional balance of power. Nuclear-powered submarines are strategic assets that only the most advanced militaries possess. By 2040, Australia will operate some of the most capable attack submarines on the planet, giving it the ability to threaten Chinese naval operations throughout the region. Combined with American, British, and potentially Japanese submarine forces, this creates an undersea threat that Chinese planners cannot ignore. Australia is also investing in long-range strike capabilities, including hypersonic weapons and extended-range missiles. These aren't systems designed to defend Australian territory, they're designed to hold Chinese forces at risk in their own bases and operating areas. That's offensive deterrence, making the cost of aggression so high that aggression becomes unthinkable. The reality is that Australia has become China's biggest strategic problem in the Indo-Pacific outside the United States itself. A militarized Taiwan would be geographically closer to China and more immediately threatening, but Taiwan is politically isolated and vulnerable. Japan is more powerful militarily but constrained by its pacifist constitution and geographic proximity to China. South Korea is capable but focused on the North Korean threat. India is powerful but separated from the Pacific by thousands of kilometers of ocean. Australia is different. It's geographically positioned to dominate the southern approaches to the Indo-Pacific. It's politically stable and committed to the Western alliance system. It has the economic resources to sustain a significant military buildup. And most importantly, it has unwavering support from the United States and increasing support from NATO countries. This is why you see increasingly aggressive Chinese rhetoric toward Australia. Beijing's propaganda apparatus regularly describes Australia as an American deputy sheriff and threatens consequences for Australian interference in regional affairs. Chinese military aircraft and naval vessels probe Australian air defense identification zones and maritime approaches. Chinese cyber actors target Australian government and business networks. This isn't random harassment, it's a deliberate campaign to test Australian resolve and potentially intimidate Canberra into softening its security posture. But it's not working. If anything, Chinese pressure has strengthened Australian determination. Public opinion polls consistently show that Australians view China as a security threat and support strong defense policies and close American ties. When Chinese diplomat Zhao Lijian posted a digitally altered image depicting an Australian soldier slaughtering an Afghan child, the Australian public rallied around their military. Beijing's heavy-handed approach has backfired, turning even traditionally pro-engagement voices in Australia toward a harder line. The bottom line is this: Australia has successfully leveraged its NATO connections, its alliance with the United States, and its geographic position to become a cornerstone of Indo-Pacific security. It extracts enormous benefits from the NATO system without formal membership obligations, and it uses those benefits to deter Chinese aggression and maintain regional stability. For China, Australia represents a problem without an easy solution. Military action is unthinkable given Australian alliance relationships. Economic coercion has failed. Diplomatic pressure has been counterproductive. Meanwhile, Australia continues to strengthen its military, deepen its partnerships, and position itself as the immovable object against Chinese expansion. This is 21st century deterrence in action. It's not about building the biggest military or having the most aircraft carriers. It's about creating a strategic environment where aggression is more costly than accommodation, where the risks of war outweigh any potential gains. Australia, through smart diplomacy, strategic geography, and deep integration with the Western alliance system, has achieved exactly that. China's rise is the defining geopolitical challenge of our era, but Australia has shown that smaller powers aren't helpless in the face of great power ambitions. By plugging into NATO capabilities, maintaining unshakable American ties, building up indigenous military strength, and refusing to be intimidated, Australia has turned itself into Beijing's strategic headache, and ensured its own security in an increasingly dangerous region. The Southern Shield holds firm, and Beijing knows it can't break through. Thanks for watching Doctrine of War. If you want more analysis of military strategy and global security dynamics, make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on Australia's strategic position, and we'll see you next. Stay informed, stay sharp.